She walks into a room not with noise but with presence. She speaks softly, yet every word feels like truth carved in stone. You don't chase her, you rise to meet her. She doesn't follow trends, she sets the tone. That is the kind of woman we're here to talk about. There is something uncommon, nearly divine, about a woman who is not afraid of silence. She doesn't hurry her words. She doesn't fidget in the quiet. She doesn't fill the air with noise just to prove she's present. She has learned over years and tears that silence is not absence. It is a presence all its own, a presence so profound it needs no explanation. When she walks into a room, she doesn't lead with volume. She leads with stillness, the kind that makes people lean in before she's even said a word. She doesn't rush to answer a question because she knows a pause can be more powerful than a performance. She knows that breath carries weight and quiet carries truth. She is not uncomfortable in her own company. She can sit at a table with herself and not feel lonely because her silence is not a void, it is a sanctuary. She's been through the fire of youth, where words poured out like wildfire, fast, hot, reckless. But with maturity, she became a master of the slow burn. She speaks with the kind of economy that only wisdom teaches. Not every opinion deserves air. Not every silence needs to be broken. Not every battle needs to be fought with a voice. She listens, truly listens. Not the kind of listening that waits to reply, but the kind that allows the other person to feel seen, heard, held. She gives people the grace of space, the gift of her full attention, and when she finally speaks, her words arrive dressed in thought. Measured, purposeful, poetic. Her silence is a form of presence. You can feel her even when she's not speaking, because silence, when held with grace, becomes magnetic. It becomes irresistible. In a world drowning in noise, constant pings, buzzing notifications, breaking news, voices shouting over each other just to be seen, a woman who stands calmly in her quiet is a lighthouse. She doesn't compete for attention, she draws it, she doesn't interrupt, she observes. And when she does enter the conversation, her words land like velvet thunder, soft but unforgettable. She has learned not to fear empty space. She knows that in silence, truth often whispers, that in the quiet, the soul reveals itself, that not all knowing comes from books or talk. Some knowing only comes in the hush between words. There is power in restraint. There is grace in holding back. There is strength in not performing for approval. This woman does not fear the pause after a question. She lets it stretch, lets it breathe. Because she's not answering from habit. She's answering from alignment. You see, she's lived long enough to know that speech is not the only language. There is a language of the eyes, of posture, of still hands folded gently in the lap, of the calm nod that says, I understand more than you think. She doesn't need to defend her silence. She doesn't need to apologize for not being more talkative. She doesn't need to explain why she's quiet. She is the explanation, because her silence is not shyness. It is sovereignty. Her silence is not weakness. It is will. It is not emptiness. It is elegance. There is a maturity that comes when a woman realizes her energy is precious, when she learns that not every conversation is worth her voice, when she understands that real power doesn't come from being loud, it comes from being grounded. She's learned to be selective with her words the way others are selective with their jewelry. Not everything sparkles, not everything adds value, so she adorns her sentences with meaning, not with clutter. When others speak over each other, she leans back. She watches, learns, lets the chaos unfold. And then, when the moment is right, she speaks, and the room shifts, because when someone speaks rarely, you listen more carefully, you lean in, you notice. A mature woman has felt the sting of being misunderstood. So now she doesn't rush to explain herself. She lets her life speak louder than her lips ever could. She walks slowly, sits with intention, smiles with the corners of her eyes, and when she nods, you feel like the earth just agreed with you. She does not waste time arguing with those who don't wish to understand. She does not battle for space in places not meant for her. She does not compete with noise. Instead, she returns to her own rhythm, to her breath, to her spirit. She has made peace with silence because silence once saved her. It was in silence that she prayed her fiercest prayers. It was in silence that she buried her heartbreaks. It was in silence that she discovered the difference between being quiet and being silenced. And she vowed never again to confuse the two. Now her silence is no longer the result of suppression. It is the fruit of freedom. She doesn't rush the moment. She doesn't fear the space between words. She knows that's where life lives. And oh, when she finally speaks, it's not just sound, it's substance. It's not just opinion, it's offering. Her words are shaped by time, seasoned by experience, wrapped in soul, and given without the need to be praised. Because she doesn't speak to impress, she speaks to bless. And that, right there, is what makes her unforgettable. A mature woman doesn't hide the places she's been cracked open. She doesn't cover the parts of her that once bled. She walks into the world not as a flawless sculpture, but as a mosaic. Broken pieces made beautiful through grace, resilience, and time. Her scars are not weaknesses, they are witnesses. They tell the story of what she endured, what she overcame, and what she refused to surrender to. When she enters the room, she's not looking for validation. She is not interested in being seen as perfect. She is committed to being seen as true. She wears her scars the way warriors wear armor, not for decoration, not for pity, but as proof that she lived, proof that she fell and stood again, proof that even though life tried to silence her, she kept singing, even if sometimes the song was just a whisper. Once upon a time, she tried to hide them, covered them with laughter, disguised them behind makeup, smiles, and polite responses. She thought the world wanted her pretty, not powerful, silent, not soulful, polished, not real, but life has a way of sanding down your pretense. Loss, betrayal, illness, heartbreak, they don't ask if you're ready, they come anyway. And in surviving them, she discovered something the world never taught her, that there is majesty in the broken, and that a scar is just a healed wound that refused to stay open. She stopped apologizing for the parts of her story that made others uncomfortable. She stopped shrinking her pain into bite-sized pieces so others could digest it without guilt. She learned that dignity doesn't come from perfection. It comes from honesty. Now, when she speaks of her past, she does so without trembling. There's no shame in her voice, only depth. You hear the tremor of pain, yes, but you also hear the drumbeat of strength beneath it. She talks about the child she lost, not for sympathy, but because love doesn't die, and neither do memories. She talks about the nights she cried herself to sleep, the mornings she forced her feet to the floor, the days she didn't recognize herself in the mirror, not to impress, but to remind the women who still feel those things that they are not alone. Her scars are roadmaps. They guide others. They say, yes, this path hurts. Yes, it might break you, but you can walk through it and you'll walk out wiser. She does not decorate her suffering, but neither does she hide from it. She doesn't pretend her past didn't happen. She honors it because without it, she wouldn't be the woman you see now, the woman who radiates self-possession, whose presence carries both weight and warmth. The world has taught women to be polished, to airbrush their history, to speak softly and carry small pain. But she has unlearned all that. She knows the power in saying, yes, that happened, and yes, I'm still here. There's a kind of holiness in that sentence, a kind of glory that doesn't shout. It shines. She doesn't look for people who love her in spite of her scars. She surrounds herself with those who love her because of them, because they know. A woman who has faced herself and kept going is the kind of woman who will not crumble when storms come. She is not fragile. She is forged. There's a calm in her voice now, not the calm that comes from never being hurt, but the calm that comes from knowing that pain doesn't get the final word. She can sit across from someone who's falling apart and not flinch, because she's been there. She's held her own grief with bare hands. She's been the woman on the bathroom floor, the woman who smiled at work while breaking inside, the woman who kept walking even when the weight was nearly unbearable. So now she walks with something deeper than confidence. She walks with conviction. Her back is straighter, not because life has been easy, but because she's carried enough burdens to know how to lift her own head. She is not bitter. She is seasoned. She is not hard. She is discerning. She is not wounded. She is weathered, and that makes her trustworthy. She no longer explains why she cried, why she stayed, why she left. She no longer tries to convince anyone of her worth. She's already convinced herself. And when she meets someone who is still trying to hide their hurt, still trying to stitch up the bleeding parts with thread made of shame, she doesn't rush them. She simply stands there, scarred, strong, and silent, so they know healing is not a return to who you were. It's the arrival of who you were meant to be all along. This woman has loved people who didn't love her back. She's trusted those who betrayed her. She's given her heart and watched it be mishandled. And still, she loves. Still, she trusts. But now she does so with boundaries shaped by wisdom and eyes that see clearly, not cynically, but clearly. She knows that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and strength doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. She doesn't need to be the bigger person. She just needs to be the truer one. And in that truth, she stands tall. There are moments when the pain still visits. Anniversaries, certain songs, old places. But now she greets that pain like an old companion. Not with fear, but with reverence. Because even sorrow, once embraced, becomes part of the sacred. So she lights candles where others build walls. She writes poetry instead of holding grudges. She lets her story be a song, not always sweet, but always honest. She does not ask the world to celebrate her wounds. She simply refuses to erase them, because her scars do not subtract from her beauty. They complete it. And if someone sees her, really sees her, they will see the radiance of a woman who has lived deeply, loved bravely, lost profoundly, and still chose to rise, to walk, to speak, and to be without apology. A mature woman knows that love is not a cage. It is a current. It flows. It breathes. It changes. And so does she. She has outgrown the kind of love that clings, demands, or begs for proof. She no longer measures affection in how tightly someone holds on. She knows that the most profound kind of love cannot be possessed. It must be honored, witnessed, and then set free to return in its own time, in its own way. She loves without chains. She doesn't wrap her hands around another person's neck and call it loyalty. She doesn't keep score. She doesn't love to own, she loves to offer. And her offering is vast, rich in patience, understanding, laughter, and presence. She gives it fully, but never forcefully. You never have to guess if she loves you, but you never feel trapped by it either. She knows that when love becomes possession, it stops being love. It becomes control, anxiety, desperation. It becomes a transaction, a leash, a tally sheet. She has no interest in that. She's learned through heartbreak, through endings, through watching love unravel in her hands, that the moment you try to cage another person, you also imprison yourself. She remembers the pain of holding on too tightly. She remembers what it cost her to squeeze love so hard that it suffocated. And she remembers most of all the freedom she felt the moment she let go, not out of defeat, but out of wisdom. So now, when she loves, she does so like the moon loves the ocean, from a place of awe, from a place of rhythm. She loves with gravity, not grasp. She's learned the art of stillness in love, the sacredness of not chasing. She understands that love is not something you hunt down or capture. It is something you tend to, like a fire, like a garden, like a prayer. She gives space, not distance out of detachment, but space out of respect, because she understands love cannot be true if it cannot breathe. She doesn't panic when someone she loves needs time. She doesn't assume silence means abandonment. She doesn't jump to conclusions or weave worst-case scenarios in her mind, because she has already loved herself through too many storms to lose herself in someone else's silence. She has come to a place where her love is rooted, not reactive. She loves like a tree, strong, unmoving, alive, and she does not require constant watering to remain whole. That's the thing. She's whole already. She does not love from lack. She loves from abundance. Her heart is not a cup waiting to be filled, but a river that runs whether or not anyone shows up to sit beside it. She does not demand you stay, but if you stay, she will open a place for you. She will make it sacred. She will make it warm, but she will never make it dependent. She does not confuse attachment with intimacy. She knows that true closeness comes not from holding someone tightly, but from seeing them clearly, letting them be who they are, letting them evolve, letting them walk beside you, not behind you. She doesn't love to be completed. She loves to be companioned, to share the road, not to define it for someone else. And because of that, her love feels different. It's not needy, it's not insecure, it's not fragile, it is steady, it is quiet, it is sacred. When she says, "I love you," it's not a request, it's a revelation. She's not asking you to return it. She's simply letting you know where her heart lives in this moment. She's not interested in contracts or ultimatums. She has no time for games that begin with, "If you really loved me, you would," because she's lived long enough to know that real love doesn't require proof. It reveals itself in presence, in effort, in truth. And if you need to go, she won't stop you. She won't chase. She won't collapse. She'll simply bow her head and wish you peace, because she doesn't love to trap, she loves to transform. She doesn't tie her worth to who stays or who leaves. Her love is not a mirror for your validation. It is a mirror for your soul. She has loved people who didn't know how to hold it, who called her too much because they were too small, who mistook her softness for weakness and her strength for distance. But still she loved. Not because they deserved it, but because she no longer shapes her love based on someone else's capacity to receive it. She now understands that love is not about who deserves it. It's about who she chooses to offer it to. And once given, she lets it stand. She lets it echo. She doesn't withhold love as punishment. She doesn't weaponize affection. She doesn't manipulate through silence or guilt. Because her love doesn't come with a leash or a ledger. It comes with light. She loves like the morning sun. She shows up, even if you're not awake yet, even if the world is still dark. Her love does not beg to be accepted. It does not mold itself to your comfort. It simply is. There is freedom in her love. Not the freedom to be careless, but the freedom to be yourself. And in a world that constantly teaches women to make themselves smaller, more likable, more accommodating, she has reclaimed the right to love without bending, without breaking, without begging, She has become her own home. So when she loves you, she's inviting you into a space that is already warm, already sacred, already whole. She's not asking you to fill the room. She's asking you to honor it. She knows now. Love is not about holding on tightly. It's about holding space. It's about trust. It's about standing beside someone and saying, "You are free to be, and I will love you still." And that kind of love, the love that frees instead of binds, that blesses instead of bargains, that sees without claiming, that kind of love is unforgettable. That kind of love is irresistible. There is a quiet revolution in the way she moves. She's not draped in diamonds or dressed to dazzle every eye in the room, yet when she enters, people notice. Not because she sparkles, but because she resonates. Not because she's loud, but because she means something. A mature woman no longer trades herself in for applause. She doesn't live to impress, but to express truth, soul, clarity, essence. She knows the difference between attention and presence, and she no longer sacrifices one for the illusion of the other. She doesn't seek approval from strangers who've never heard her cry. She doesn't need validation from rooms that value packaging over purpose. She has outgrown the need to decorate her outer world to distract from her inner emptiness, because she is no longer empty. She has filled herself, not with applause, not with perfume, not with perfection, but with silence, self-study, story, and stillness. The world taught her early to beautify herself, to dress up, show up, slim down, speak softly, smile sweetly, but no one taught her how to become substantial. No one showed her how to build a mind that could weather conflict, a heart that could sit with pain, a spirit that could stand in a storm. So she learned on her own. She read books not for show, but for survival. She sat in quiet corners wrestling with herself. She had conversations that left her trembling, not because they were loud, but because they were real. Now she is not easily distracted, not by compliments, not by charm, not by flash. She seeks out the root of things. You will not catch her obsessing over trends. She's not concerned with what's in season. She's concerned with what's in alignment. Fashion may be fleeting, but soul never goes out of style. Her beauty isn't immediate, it's revealed. It unfolds in the way she listens with her whole body, in the weight of her questions, in the poetry of her laughter, in the moments between her sentences, where she leaves space for truth to rise. She doesn't sparkle, she glows. From somewhere deep inside, the kind of glow that comes from healing old wounds, setting firm boundaries, and speaking the kind of honesty that makes people sit up straighter. She is not for the shallow-hearted, because when she speaks, she doesn't skim the surface. She dives, she goes deep, she asks what you believe and why. She wants to know what broke you and what saved you, what parts of yourself you had to bury just to survive. And if you're not ready for that kind of depth, she will not chase you. She will not shrink to fit the comfort of your shallowness. She will simply withdraw with grace and take her richness elsewhere, because her soul is not for sale. Her mind is not a showroom. Her presence is not a product. She chooses conversations that nourish, not entertain, relationships that stretch, not perform, rituals that restore, not distract. She knows the cost of living on the surface. She's been there, smiling through sorrow, laughing through loneliness, perfecting the art of seeming okay while quietly unraveling. So now she chooses differently. She drinks deeply from her mornings, moves through her days with intention, and before she gives her time to anyone, she asks, will this feed me or will it drain me? Will it lift me or will it leak me? And if the answer is anything but depth, she walks away. She's not afraid of solitude. She cherishes it, Because solitude is where she remembers who she is when no one is watching. It's where she reconnects with the divine. It's where she tends to the parts of herself no one else can see. She doesn't dress for the world anymore. She dresses for her spirit. She lights candles not for ambiance, but to sanctify her space. She wears jewelry that means something. Her grandmother's ring, a stone from a sacred place. She wears her history like skin, proud, imperfect, irreplaceable. There is nothing empty in her. She's filled every inch of herself with soul. She's edited her life like a poem, cutting the unnecessary, leaving only what's true. When she loves richly, not with grand gestures, but with presence. She looks you in the eyes and makes you feel like you've been invited somewhere sacred. She doesn't flatter. She affirms. When she touches you, it feels like an offering. When she speaks to you, it feels like medicine. She doesn't love for fun. She loves for truth. She's learned to ask better questions. Not, do you like me? But do you see me? Not, will you stay? But can we grow? Not, are we good together? But are we real together? Because she doesn't need performance. She needs partnership. She doesn't want a picture-perfect life. She wants a life that breathes, bleeds, and blooms. She's walked away from shallow waters, even when they looked pretty. She's learned that calm is not the same as peace, that excitement is not the same as joy, that pretty words mean nothing if they aren't rooted in action. She would rather sit alone with her books, her prayers, and her morning tea than in a room full of noise that starves her soul. She's not lonely, she's rich, rich in thought, rich in memory, rich in grace, rich in layers no mirror could reflect. She doesn't measure her worth by what she owns, who she knows, or how young she looks. She measures it in how deeply she's lived, how gently she speaks to herself, how freely she forgives. So when you meet her, don't be fooled by the simplicity of her style. It is not emptiness, it is essence. Don't mistake her softness for absence of strength. Don't underestimate her silence. There's a whole universe moving behind her eyes. She's not trying to stand out anymore. She's trying to stand true, and in doing so, she has become rare. Not because she tries to be, but because she chooses depth in a world addicted to decoration. She does not move like someone racing toward a finish line. She moves like someone who knows. The sacred is never in a hurry. There is intention in her pace, grace in her gestures. When she steps into a room, the atmosphere doesn't shift from her speed, but from her stillness. She carries time differently, like it's folded neatly in the palms of her hands, not scattered behind her like lost hours. She is no longer enslaved by urgency. She once was, oh yes. There were years she rushed through mornings, fumbled through conversations, raced through relationships, mistaking motion for meaning. But that was before she learned that speed doesn't equal significance, before she realized that life isn't measured by how fast you move, but by how deeply you live. Now, everything about her life is a quiet ceremony. She wakes slowly. She greets the morning not with a groan, but with gratitude. Before the world demands her attention, she gives it first to herself, to her breath, to her spirit, to the rising sun outside her window. She stirs her tea as if stirring the beginning of a poem. She pours it not like a task, but like a ritual, a slow, deliberate act of nourishment. She doesn't scroll, she doesn't scramble, she savors. Her clothes are not thrown on, but chosen, like words for a sacred speech. Not always fancy, not always fashionable, but always felt. And when she walks, you notice. She isn't pushing through the day, she's in conversation with it. She makes her life a series of small sanctuaries, lighting a candle before a meal, saying thank you when her feet hit the ground, laying her hands gently on the book before she opens it. These aren't habits. They are moments of meaning strung together like prayer beads. The world might call it slow. She calls it devotional because rushing is a habit of the unrooted, those who are afraid to feel, those who move so fast they forget to touch the very life they're building. But she touches everything. She touches the day with presence. She touches people with presence. She touches her own heart with presence. And that's what makes her magnetic. She's not in a hurry to get somewhere. She's already arrived in herself, in her body, in this breath. And when you sit beside someone like that, you feel it. You feel the way time slows down around them. You feel the invitation to pause, to breathe, to be. She doesn't multitask through her moments. She devotes herself fully to one thing at a time because she understands scattering your attention is a form of self-abandonment, and she has learned, often the hard way, that being everywhere is the fastest path to being nowhere. So she picks one thing and she is there, fully. Whether it's chopping vegetables, tying her shoelaces, writing a letter, or listening to a friend. And in doing so, she turns ordinary life into something luminous. She's turned chores into communion, errands into meditation, daily routines into rituals of reverence. She no longer fills her calendar just to feel useful. She no longer says yes to everything just to avoid guilt. She no longer wears exhaustion as a badge of honor. Now she honors herself in ways the world may never see. She cancels the meeting when her spirit is weary. She turns down the noise when her soul needs silence. She draws herself a bath on a random Wednesday night and soaks in her own stillness, not needing to explain it to anyone. She doesn't rush through meals anymore. She blesses the food in her heart. She tastes it. She thanks it. She lets it nourish her, not just feed her, because she knows that how you eat is as important as what you eat, that how you rise in the morning shapes your whole day, that how you say goodbye teaches you how to let go. There is rhythm in her days, a sacred beat that she's crafted with care, not rigid, not scheduled down to the second, but rooted. She doesn't live by alarms anymore. She lives by alignment. She still keeps time, yes, but she does not serve it. She partners with it. And that's why her presence feels so rare, because she's not distracted. She's not 2 steps ahead in her mind. She is here, fully. When she talks to you, you feel like you're the only one in the room. And when she listens, it's not just to respond, it's to receive. She listens with her whole face, her whole being. She's learned the art of slowing down long enough to truly witness someone, even in moments of grief, of anger, of disappointment. She doesn't lash out in haste. She pauses. She breathes. She feels. She waits for the truth to rise instead of reaching for the nearest reaction, because she knows there is power in restraint. There is clarity in pause. There is strength in stillness before response. There was a time she would have answered too quickly, said yes when she meant no, said nothing when she meant to speak. But those days are gone, buried under years of growth and the quiet wisdom of choosing herself. Now she moves with trust in her timing, in her intuition, in the divine pacing of life itself. She does not fear being late. She fears being unconscious. She fears missing the holy moment while chasing something unworthy. And so she moves like a woman who knows that every step can be a prayer, that every breath can be an altar, that every morning is a beginning and every night a blessing. And when the world rushes past her, when it honks and yells and swipes and screams, she does not join the stampede. She returns to her center. She turns inward. She slows down until she can hear the whisper of her own truth again. And in that space where urgency ends and ritual begins, she lives. She belongs. She becomes. There is a stillness about her, not born of inaction, but of intention. She does not wander in chaos. She walks in calm, But don't mistake her peace for passivity. She guards it like sacred ground, like a lioness protecting her den. She has fought for this peace, earned it, grown it in soil soaked with heartbreak, disappointment, and the noise of a world that never learned how to whisper. There were years when she let anyone walk in and rearrange the furniture of her soul. Years when she silenced her own needs to keep the air smooth for others, when she confused peace with pleasing, silence with safety, surrender with survival. But not anymore. Now she stands at the doorway of her inner life with eyes wide open, not suspicious, not bitter, but wise. She no longer lets every voice enter her sacred space. She doesn't offer keys to every smile. She listens. Yes, she welcomes, yes, but she also discerns, because she has learned. Some people do not come to love you. They come to test you, to drain you, to take from the well and never fill it again. And now she does not apologize for keeping the bucket close. She doesn't explain why some people must sit outside the gates of her spirit. Her peace is not for sale, not for flattery, not for urgency, not for guilt. She knows the cost of letting the wrong energy linger. She knows what it does to the skin, to the sleep, to the rhythm of the breath. She knows how long it takes to rebuild a sanctuary once it's been invaded, so now she chooses her company with the same care she chooses her words. Gently but firmly, lovingly but with boundaries carved in clarity. She no longer just says yes out of habit. Now she pauses. She checks with her spirit. She asks, does this honor my peace or does it disturb it? And if it doesn't align, she lets it go. Not with hostility, but with grace. With the quiet knowing that not every presence deserves a seat in her temple. She protects her mornings. She doesn't wake up to chaos anymore. She doesn't reach for her phone before her breath. She moves through her dawn like a priestess, light-footed, soft-spoken, grounded. She may light a candle. She may sit in silence. She may read something ancient or simply gaze out the window until the world feels gentle enough to enter. She doesn't let people barge in with their drama, doesn't jump at every call, doesn't perform emotional labor for people who won't do the work themselves. And when someone tries to pull her into a storm that isn't hers, she doesn't fight the wind. She steps back. She says, "This is not my weather," and she returns to her sky. Because her peace is not a mood, it is her home. She built it with sweat and tears, and now she defends it with quiet courage. She has learned the difference between helping and absorbing. She knows how to hold space without losing herself in someone else's chaos. She listens without carrying. She loves without bleeding dry. She shows up with presence, not martyrdom. There was a time when she gave until she broke, when she thought love meant never saying no, when she wore exhaustion like a badge and wondered why she always felt empty. But those days have passed. Now she gives from overflow, not depletion. She knows that the most beautiful gift she can offer the world is a soul that's not unraveling. So she rests on purpose. She takes naps, not as a luxury, but as medicine. She turns down invitations not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. She leaves the table when respect is no longer served. She walks away from gossip like it's poison, because to her it is. She avoids small talk that drains and leans into silences that restore. And when someone demands, "Why are you so distant?" she doesn't defend, she doesn't explain. She simply smiles the kind of smile that says, "I am not distant. I am deeply present with myself." She knows now that not every conversation requires her opinion, that peace is not always found in the last word, but often in choosing not to speak at all. She practices sacred no's, no to chaos disguised as connection, no to urgency dressed as opportunity. No to people who love her as long as she stays small, and her yes is just as sacred. Yes to stillness, yes to authenticity, yes to time spent in her own company. She keeps her phone on silent sometimes, not to avoid, but to honor. She knows that constant access is not the same as deep connection. She protects her time like a garden. Only those who tread lightly are welcome among her flowers. Her peace is not always soft, though. Sometimes it is fierce. It says, "Do not cross this line." It says, "I love you, but I will not lose myself for you." It says, "I am still here, but I will not shrink to make you comfortable." And when conflict comes, as it does, she doesn't erupt. She breathes. She asks, "Is this mine to carry?" And if the answer is no, she lays it down. She does not chase closure. She does not beg for peace from others. She creates it within herself, moment by moment, because she has learned that the world may never calm down, but she can, and that is where her power lives, not in control, but in choice, not in force, but in flow, not in noise, but in knowing. She is a woman who protects her peace like a lioness because she understands that her joy, her wellness, her clarity are sacred, not to be tossed in the tide of someone else's crisis, not to be chipped away by chronic urgency, not to be compromised by the discomfort of setting boundaries. She doesn't do it for aesthetics. She doesn't do it to appear enlightened. She does it because peace is how she survives, and more than that, how she thrives. She has no interest in living loud for the sake of attention. She is here to live true, and in that truth, in that rhythm, in that watchful, unwavering protection of her own inner life, she becomes something rare, something radiant, something untouchable by the storm. Because peace is not something she found, it is something she became. An irresistible woman is not born. She is built through fire, stillness, love, grief, and grace. She is not the loudest in the room, but she is always the one you remember. So if the world ever told you that your power fades with age, tell it. My power is just learning to speak its native tongue. Let these 6 habits guide you, not to be liked, but to be luminous. Not to be chased, but to be chosen by yourself first. Now go, walk in your rhythm, own your peace, and let the world feel what a woman becomes when she finally stops asking for permission to be magnificent.